They make them in different widths. So this one is 700 by 23 to 25. So 23 to 25 is kind of like a big tube, wide tube for a road wheel / tire. And then also tire levers. These are absolutely essential. I carry a multi-tool with me because somebody on the ride always has a loose seat post, or I always have a loose seat post, or my pedal always falls off. So it's really nice to have. This one also has a chain tool, which is kind of the epitome of a bike dork tool to carry. This one can help you fix a broken chain. And then this is the coolest thing that I think is available. There's hand pumps, which after you've used a few times, you'll realize they're no fun. This little canister is a 16-gram canister of CO2, and it's enough to inflate a road tube to the point at which you can ride on it for hours. So it'll inflate it to like 100, 110 psi, so really high. And then this is the little administer apparatus which works with it. And you can see that there's a spring right here, and the spring basically compresses down, and that mechanism basically will puncture a hole in the top of this CO2 canister, so that when you push in and then you push the green part down, it releases the CO2 into your tube. And I'll actually just show you demonstrating with the CO2. So I'm riding along, I just got a flat tire, so I let all my air out. So now the clock starts ticking. And you can use 1 or 2 tire levers, and basically what you do is generally easiest to start on the opposite end of the valve here. So you take a tire lever and you kind of work the edge of the tire away from the wheel, and now there's 2 ends of this tire lever. There's one that's kind of this prying mechanism, this little curved shaped piece of plastic here, and you just use that to pry up the edge of the tire, and the goal is to get the edge of the tire over onto the side of the rim. And this tire is relatively easy, so I've done that, and so now, yeah, I did that. That's nice.
So you jinxed it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I've experienced this many times, right here.
Well, you also have a lot of people watching it.
So now what I do is just use one, because one I find it easiest. And so now that I have the edge up, what I'm going to try to do is grab onto the rim really tight. And now I'm going to use this tire lever to pry along the edge. And the way I do that is just slide. So I just basically took the entire edge of one side of the tire out. And so this is where you can be very efficient about it. You leave the other edge of your tire on. And so in this manner, basically what you're going to do is now come to the point at which you have the valve and kind of work it out so that you can grab onto the tube right at the valve. And now at this point you pull that out, and from here just pull the whole tube out. Okay, so I have a brand new tube. I'm getting ready to put it in. When you have a CO2 canister and you have a flat tube, let's pretend this is a brand new tube. I just fixed it. It's best to place a tube into and onto a rim after there's a little bit of air on it. And the reason for that is if it's flat completely and there's no air in it, when you put it onto your rim and then you seat the tire back on around it, if there's no air in there, what's going to happen is at some point along the surface of the rim, the tire can basically pinch down on this flat portion of the tube. And from there, when you fill it up, you can end up puncturing your tube again. So you just put a brand new tube in and you fill it up, and then you're flat again. So the best situation is to have a hand pump at this point. Because when you're on the road and you just have a CO2 canister, it's hard to administer just a touch of the CO2 so that you get only a little bit of air. So I'm just going to demonstrate with a hand pump, assuming that somebody on the ride or you have a hand pump. You put in just enough to kind of give it a little bit of volume. And this may even be too much, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. So now that there's a little bit of air in the tube, I find it easiest to place the tire and wheel parallel with the ground, and to first identify the valve hole. And this is going to be the first part of the tube that you place in. So I'm going to have the valve hole right here. I take the valve, stick it through. It's easiest to close the valve as you're doing this. And now from here, it's basically just kind of common sense to work the tube up onto the rim. And then once it's reasonably in place, it's kind of a little bit of a wrestling match. And the best approach to this is to always start on the side opposite of where the valve is. So as opposed to starting here, I'm going to go directly, this is my 6 o'clock, I'm going to go to 12 o'clock. And from here, I'm just going to take my thumbs. And this is also where, the guy with the big forearms wins. Because sometimes, especially if the tire is new, it's tight to get onto the rim. And all you're doing is just taking your thumbs and at the 12 o'clock position, using both of them, and prying basically this bead of the tire, the edge of the tire, into the rim. And then from here, I'm just going to work down, one going clockwise and the other hand's going counterclockwise. And then just working in, trying, if possible, to not pinch the tube in between the bead of the tire and the rim. Because again, once you fill it up and if it's pinched, that can result in a second flat, which is never fun. So this part's all very easy, well and good. The last few inches are never fun. The way to do this is basically to try to get leverage on it. And to do that, you position the valve at this point, which is the last portion that hasn't yet had the tire put onto the rim yet, away from you. And now from here, you're just going to, with as much strength as possible, try to work your thumbs onto the edge of the tire and then push it over. If you do a lot of these every day, it's really easy to do. I usually cheat. And this kind of gets into a little bit of a dangerous technique. For two reasons. One, because this last portion of getting the tire onto the rim, using a tire lever can break the tire lever, and then you have a piece of tire lever stuck in there, and then you're back in the same position you started at. And two, because you can actually puncture the tube with your tire lever. So you have to do this very carefully. But the way I cheat is just by very carefully working the tire lever up in, grabbing the rim, but trying really hard. And this is obviously a thing that you kind of learn with the experience, but trying not to push in too far such that the edge of the tire lever is contacting the new tube that you put in. So kind of right on the edge there, and then just kind of trying to pop it a little bit. And sometimes you just need it once, and then the rest of it you can get with your fingers. So I just, put it all the way on. And then the nifty CO2. You guys reimburse me for my CO2 card? Absolutely. So you screw this on. Again, this was an unused CO2 cartridge. I just screwed on my little apparatus, which is spring-loaded. This portion is reusable. These are kind of expensive. They're like 25 bucks. And when you buy that, you get the spring-loaded administrative mechanism. I don't know what they're called. And then you get the cartridge, and then the CO2 cartridges you can recycle at bike shops and also buy new ones at bike shops. And so from here, what I'm going to do, I just screwed it in tight. Find the valve, make sure it's open. Really is not fun to administer an entire CO2 cartridge into a closed valve, because then you've just wasted it. So this is kind of like the last step, because this thing is going to fill this tube up in a matter of seconds. But again, you need to be kind of careful because you don't want to waste your CO2. So this way to do this is you place it on the valve. Once you have a firm interface between the valve and your little administrative thing, you, in this case, just what I'm going to do is push down one portion of the metal here and wait until it stops inflating, pull it off, done. So these things are good.